Welcome to your Monday. I'm J Cleveland Payne, aka your Mr. Monday, and this quick bit of motivation and inspiration was originally published on February the 28th, 2022. The original message goes as follows. Most people only remember the premise of a TV show's pilot if there was a major character change in episode 2. Most people cannot recall your debut to the world either. So going deeper in this one, I'm going to bring up two distinct different TV shows, and how I remember the pieces of them are kind of odd, but it is what it is. Number one is the show Psych, and the main reason why I remember the actual pilot for the Psych, for the TV show, was there was an extreme character change, major, for the episode 2. In episode 2, they introduced the role of Jules as the new partner for Lassiter. When the original pilot, Lassiter was having an affair with his partner, which Sean picked up on in the pilot. And in the change from the first episode to the second episode, they introduced another person who ended up being the love interest for Sean Spencer in the show. That's a unique and distinct different change because they had to reestablish from the get-go in season 1 that there was a change from the norm, and it took a little while for those characters to sort of shine to each other, being Lassiter and Jules, and then fitting the whole sort of narrative going forward. Another TV show that had a premise that was so weird and wacky, but so long ago that I didn't think about it, was Knight Rider. And that was because when Knight Rider was on, I was in elementary school, and it was just cool to have the talking car that drove by itself, that I really didn't get the fact that the show was really horribly made. However, most of those shows back then were kind of horrible, but that's beside the point. I rewatched the pilot on Netflix a few months back and remembered the whole premise of the show where Michael Knight was Michael Long, and he was killed or left for dead, and they had plastic surgery to make him look like this other guy. And that's what happened in the pilot. But the pilot was so horrible, so badly made, and actually made absolutely no sense from the goings-ons going forward of the TV show still being an awful show in itself, but having a sense of knowing what its purpose was, and, you know, the scripts making sense, and having this random guy show up in a town like an old Western and just being the random hero like the Lone Ranger or the Rifleman from back in the day. But the original premise was just so horrible that it just so happened that maybe I didn't actually see it as a kid. Maybe I tuned in somewhere near episode 4 or 5 when I was just curious about the talking car. And maybe if I was a kid, I probably would not have really realized just how bad it was from the pilot. Probably just kept watching it because of the talking car. The point about all this and the rambling on bad pilots for TV shows and not so bad pilots for TV shows is that most people don't really recognize a person's beginning or how they started or their actual origin story, which is why so many people can get around by changing their story so often and you not thinking about them because you meet them somewhere on iteration 3 or 4. So whatever they're telling you as their beginning sort of makes sense, even if you weren't there to witnesses and even weren't there to see sort of the real warts and all that were there. Why does this matter? Well, it's not about TV shows. It literally is about you and your perception of the world, or your perception of people thinking about you managing the world. You may not think that you come from the right pedigree. You may not think you're cut from the right cloth. You may not think that you can fit in a world that's glitzier or grittier or smarter or whatever it is you're trying to break into. It doesn't really matter, because those people that you see right now are of a polish that is not the way they started off with. They didn't begin as good as you see them right now. And you won't always be in your level. You won't always be at a beginner level or intermediate level. At some point, you'll be a top tier star, and people won't recognize your beginning either. So don't be so worried about where you start. Don't be so worried about starting off on a false sort of equivalence of being anything else, being good at all. That's not the problem. Your problem is maintaining long enough so that people don't care about your origin story, don't care about the pilot episode of your start, don't care about all the flubs that happened in the past. They become rumor, they become innuendo. They don't believe it because you're so good at what you're doing right now. That's it. Keep on going. Don't worry if your start didn't start out so well. Don't worry if you had some flubs along the way. Don't worry about whatever sort of records that pop up that show you in a negative light. In fact, you will see, if you really do follow the genre of superheroes, they keep reconning and rewriting and redoing a superhero story to keep modernizing, to keep that legend alive. We don't tell the same stories of yesteryear because nobody remembers how things worked out. That's why Davy Crockett as a superhero, as someone they talk about in Pulp Fiction, doesn't work as well as a Batman. Because Batman, you just keep updating his gadgets and rehashing time frames and making it work out so that Batman lives in a current time, besides the fact that the character is almost 100 years old. Remember, Superman was written by Jewish people to sort of have a symbol to fight the Nazis. And now we're fighting with Superman because now he's kind of woke and people are afraid that now that his son is bisexual, he's not fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. In fact, he's not. He's fighting for the universal way. They changed that tagline, and people are up in arms about it. But that's not how he originally started. And so we can fight over that. But we're not fighting over comic books right now. What we're going to fight over right now is actually the fact that you don't have to worry about your start so much. You need to worry about where you're trying to finish. So don't be so hung up on your origin story. Don't be so hung up on the pilot episode that you came out with. It's probably horrible. They all are horrible. All shows usually evolve. Think about Seinfeld. I didn't bring that one up because that pilot to that show, the Seinfeld Chronicles, is nothing like what the show ended up with and nothing like what it turned out to be around season 2 when they just let the whole thing go. Don't worry about it. Just keep striving going forward and let your current episode, your current season, be what determines how people determine you and not what came back in your first script. Most people only remember the premise of a TV show's pilot if there was a major character change in episode 2. Most people cannot recall your debut to the world either. This original message was published on February 28, 2022 from Welcome to Your Monday. For more messages like this one, plus books, merchandise, and other information related to this project, visit the website, welcometoyourmonday.com.